There's a version of you that doesn't exist in any mirror. It doesn't show up in photographs. Your friends have never met it. Your family doesn't know it exists. And yet this hidden self has been making your most important decisions for decades. It chose your career, picked your relationships, determined what you're afraid of, and set the limits on what you believe you deserve. Right now, as you're hearing these words, this stranger inside you is deciding whether you'll finish watching this video or click away. And the most disturbing part, you think you're in control. Psychologist Carl Jung spent 50 years studying why intelligent, capable people systematically destroy their own lives. What he discovered wasn't just a theory. It was a map to the underground territory of the human mind, a place where your rejected qualities, suppressed desires, and denied truths have been gathering strength in the darkness. He called this your shadow, and he warned that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. If that statement just landed differently than usual self-help advice, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button now, because what we're covering today on Silent Strategist isn't about positive thinking or motivation. This is about psychological surgery on yourself. Think about the last time you sabotaged something good in your life. Maybe you had a real opportunity and found a way to ruin it. Maybe you were in a healthy relationship and created drama until it fell apart. Maybe you set a goal and then consistently did everything except work toward it. You probably blamed circumstances, other people, bad timing. But what if I told you there was something inside you that needed you to fail? Not because you're broken, but because success would have forced you to become someone your unconscious mind isn't ready to accept. I'll give you a concrete example. There's a man, let's call him David, 48 years old, successful career, good family, respected in his community. By all external measures, he's won at life. But every night he lies awake with a knot in his chest, feeling like he's living someone else's story. He built everything he was supposed to build, achieved everything he was supposed to achieve, and yet he feels nothing, empty, numb, going through motions. Why? Because the persona he constructed, the responsible provider, the steady professional, the good husband, that mask became a prison. And everything that made him actually feel alive, his wildness, his creativity, his anger, his desire for adventure, all of that got locked in the basement 40 years ago when he learned what it took to be accepted. Now that disowned energy is eating him from the inside. It shows up as depression his doctor can't explain, as irritability that erupts at random moments, as fantasies of burning his entire life down and disappearing. His shadow is screaming at him, and he keeps turning up the volume on his distractions, working harder, drinking more, scrolling endlessly, anything to avoid hearing that voice. This is how most people live. And this is how most people die, never having been truly alive. Here's what most people never understand. You have spent your entire life constructing a personality, a version of yourself that you show to the world. Jung called this the persona, the mask you wear to be accepted, liked, hired, loved. You learned early what gets rewarded and what gets punished, so you emphasized certain qualities and buried others. You became the responsible one, the funny one, the smart one, the nice one. And every time you put on that mask, you pushed something real about yourself further into the basement of your psyche. The problem is this: that basement doesn't stay empty and quiet. Everything you rejected about yourself, every impulse you called bad, every emotion you labeled inappropriate, every desire you deemed selfish, it all went down there. And in the darkness, it didn't die. It grew. It got hungrier. It started running your life from behind the scenes, expressing itself in ways you don't recognize as coming from you. This is the shadow, and it's far more powerful than the personality you've been performing. Let me give you an example that'll make this real. You know that person at work who makes your blood boil? The one who's arrogant, selfish, always taking credit, never admitting mistakes? Your hatred of them is so strong, it's almost physical. Now, here's the part that's hard to hear. The intensity of your reaction isn't about them, it's about you. Specifically, it's about the parts of you that wanted to be bold, assertive, unapologetic, and self-promoting, but you crushed those impulses because you were taught they were wrong. So now, when you see someone expressing those qualities freely, your shadow goes crazy. That person is living out the life your suppressed self wanted, and your conscious mind has to villainize them to avoid facing what you denied in yourself. Let me make this even more specific. Remember being a kid and watching another child grab what they wanted without asking permission? Maybe you were taught to wait your turn, be polite, consider others first. Good lessons on the surface. But what if you internalize that so deeply that you cut and advocate for yourself, even when it's appropriate? Now you're an adult, and every time you see someone who has no problem demanding what they want, taking up space, being unapologetically self-interested, you feel rage. You call them entitled, narcissistic, toxic, and maybe they are. But your disproportionate reaction, the way they live rent-free in your head, that's about your shadow. That's about the part of you that never got to be selfish, even when you should have been. That's about the voice you silenced that wanted to say, "What about me? What about what I want?" This is called projection, and once you understand it, you'll never see conflict the same way again. Every person who triggers you, every quality you hate in others, every behavior that disgusts you beyond what seems rational, these are mirrors. They're showing you the exiled parts of yourself. And here's the real power move. When you can recognize that your enemy is actually your teacher, when you can reclaim those projections and admit that, yes, I have that quality too, you gain something priceless. You gain sovereignty over your own emotional state. Nobody can manipulate you anymore because you're not unconsciously reacting to your own shadow when you see it in them. If this is hitting different than the usual content you consume, do me a favor. Drop a comment below and tell me one quality you hate in other people. Just one word. Arrogance, laziness, weakness, whatever comes to mind first. That's probably your shadow talking. And while you're down there, hit that like button. It helps this message reach people who are ready to hear it, even though most people will keep running from this truth their entire lives. Now let's go deeper, because the shadow isn't just made of darkness. This is what most people miss, and it's the part that will change everything if you understand it. Yes, your shadow contains the aggressive, selfish, destructive parts you denied. But it also contains gold. It contains your power, your creativity, your authentic voice, your capacity for joy, your sexual energy, your rebellion, your intuition. These got suppressed too, often in childhood, because they threatened someone's control over you or didn't fit the narrow role you were assigned. Think about the kid who was told to stop being so loud, so dramatic, so weird, so intense. That child learned to shut down their natural expressiveness to avoid rejection. Now they're an adult who feels flat, disconnected, unable to access passion or spontaneity. Their shadow is holding all that stolen energy hostage. Or consider the boy who was shamed for crying, for being sensitive, for showing fear. He learned to bury his emotional depth and became a man who can't connect. Can't be vulnerable, can't even identify what he's feeling half the time. His shadow is guarding the very capacity for intimacy he now desperately wants but can't access. I'll tell you about a pattern I see constantly. A man in his 50s finally achieves everything he worked for. The career stability, the financial security, the respect from peers. And instead of satisfaction, he feels dead inside. He looks at his life and realizes he's been following a script someone else wrote. His father's expectations, his culture's definition of success, his wife's vision of who he should be. He never asked himself what he actually wanted. And now, the parts of him that hold his true desires, his authentic preferences, his real personality, they're so deeply buried he doesn't even know how to access them anymore. He'll come to me asking why he feels nothing, and the answer is always the same. You amputated the parts of yourself that feel, and now you're surprised you're numb. Or here's another version. A woman spends her entire youth being praised for being nice, accommodating, never causing trouble. She becomes an expert at reading rooms, managing other people's emotions, making herself small so others feel big. By 40, she's exhausted, resentful, and has no idea who she is beyond her role as caretaker. Her shadow holds her rage, her boundaries, her selfishness in the healthiest sense of that word. And until she reclaims those qualities, she keeps attracting people who use her, keep feeling invisible, keep wondering why she gives everything and receives nothing. This is shadow work. It's not just confronting your darkness. It's reclaiming your light. It's going into that basement and bringing back everything that was taken from you, everything you gave away to be loved, everything you sacrificed to be safe. And when you do this, something remarkable happens. You stop being a half person pretending to be whole. You become genuinely powerful, genuinely magnetic, genuinely alive. Because integrated people who've done this work, they have a presence that can't be faked. You can feel it when you're around them. They're not performing. They're not trying to prove anything. They're complete. Let me tell you what happens to a man who never does this work, because this is the epidemic nobody's talking about. He spends his whole life being the good guy. He's polite, responsible, never makes waves, always does what's expected. He prides himself on being rational, controlled, above petty emotions. He thinks this makes him virtuous. But here's what's actually happening. All that suppressed aggression, all that denied desire, all that unexpressed emotion, it's building pressure. And one day it erupts. Maybe it's a rage incident that shocks everyone who knows him. Maybe it's an affair that destroys his marriage. Maybe it's a breakdown, an addiction, a complete personality shift that nobody saw coming. People say, I can't believe he did that. He was always so normal, so stable. But Jung would say, of course he did that. The shadow always gets its due. You can't cheat it forever. I've seen this play out in devastating ways. The pastor who preaches purity and gets caught in a scandal. The executive who champions ethics and gets indicted for fraud. The family man who seems perfect and walks out one day never to return. These aren't stories of bad people fooling everyone. These are stories of divided people who pushed their shadow so far down that when it finally surfaced, it took over completely. They swung from total repression to total possession. And the tragedy is that it didn't have to be that way. If they'd integrated those parts consciously, gradually, deliberately, they could have expressed them in healthy, controlled ways. Instead, the pressure built until the dam broke. And here's what's even more insidious. The men who are most convinced they've transcended their lower nature, who believe they're purely rational, purely ethical, purely in control, they're the most dangerous. Not because they're evil, but because they have zero awareness of their capacity for it. They genuinely don't see the manipulation they employ. They don't recognize the cruelty in their righteousness. They don't notice how their moral certainty gives them permission to hurt people in the name of principle. They've taken their shadow, dressed it up in the language of virtue, and set it loose on the world while remaining convinced they're doing good. And here's the really dangerous part. The people who are most convinced they don't have a shadow, the ones who are absolutely certain they're good people, they're the most dangerous. Because they have zero awareness of what they're capable of. They project all their darkness onto others, and then feel justified in attacking those people with self-righteous fury. They become the witch hunters, the crusaders, the mob, all while genuinely believing they're on the side of good. The mechanism is always the same. Deny your own capacity for evil, and you'll find it everywhere else and feel morally obligated to destroy it. So what's the alternative? Integration. Not becoming a worse person, but becoming a whole person. A man who has integrated his shadow isn't controlled by it anymore. He knows he's capable of violence, so he doesn't need to prove it. He knows he has selfish impulses, so he can choose when to indulge them and when to override them. He knows he has weaknesses, so he doesn't waste energy pretending to be invincible. This is real strength, not the brittle, defended, fake strength of someone who can't admit their humanity, but the flexible, grounded, authentic strength of someone who knows themselves completely. Here's how this plays out practically, and I want you to really pay attention to this part because this is where theory becomes power. When you haven't integrated your shadow, you're constantly at war with yourself. Part of you wants success, but another part sabotages it. Part of you craves intimacy, but another part picks fights and creates distance. Part of you has ambitions, but another part whispers that you don't deserve it. You're trying to drive a car with one foot on the gas and one on the brake, and you wonder why you're not moving forward. But when you've done shadow work, when you've acknowledged all the parts of yourself and made peace with them, something shifts. You can make clean decisions. When you choose to be generous, it's genuine, not a performance to avoid feeling selfish. When you set a boundary, you don't feel guilty because you've accepted that self-protection isn't evil. When you pursue a goal, you're not unconsciously undermining yourself because all parts of you are aligned. This is what Jung called individuation, becoming undivided. Becoming the specific, unique individual you actually are instead of the generic personality type you thought you should be. Now I need to talk about something that makes most men uncomfortable, but it's essential, so stay with me. Jung identified another unconscious force he called the Anima, which is the inner feminine within every man. And before you click away thinking this is some abstract mystical concept, let me make it concrete. Have you ever had a mood come over you that you couldn't explain? A sudden depression, irritability, anxiety that seemed to have no external cause? Have you ever become obsessed with a woman to the point where you lost all rational perspective? Have you ever felt emotionally hijacked, like something took over and you were just watching yourself act out? That's anima possession. The anima represents everything you told yourself a man shouldn't be. Emotional, receptive, intuitive, vulnerable, connected to beauty and meaning. And because you rejected these qualities as weakness, they went into the unconscious where they became a separate, autonomous force. Now they possess you from time to time, turning you into someone you don't recognize. Moody, irrational, controlled by feelings you can't name. The solution isn't to suppress harder. It's to integrate. To consciously develop a relationship with your emotional inner world. To value intuition alongside logic. To become comfortable with receptivity, not just constant action and control. When a man integrates his anima, he gains emotional intelligence, depth, creativity, and the ability to actually connect with other human beings. He stops being the guy who can build an empire but can't maintain a relationship. He stops being powerful in the world but hollow inside. He becomes whole. And that wholeness is attractive in a way that performance never is. Women feel it. People feel it. You become someone who has access to the full spectrum of human experience, not just the narrow band society told you was acceptable for your gender. Drop a comment if this is making you rethink some things. And share this video with someone who needs to hear it, because the algorithm only shows this to people who engage with it. And most people are too scared to engage with content that challenges them this deeply. Let me give you something you can use right now, today, before this video ends. Shadow work isn't just a concept to understand. It's a practice to implement. Here's where you start. For the next week, pay attention to every strong emotional reaction you have. Not just anger, but disgust, contempt, righteous indignation, intense admiration, obsessive attraction. Anything that feels disproportionate to the situation, write it down. Then ask yourself this question. What quality is this person displaying that I've denied in myself? Or what quality am I projecting onto them that I refuse to see in me? This is uncomfortable work. Your ego will fight it. You'll want to insist that no, really, that person is actually terrible, and your reaction is completely justified. But push through that resistance. Because every time you reclaim a projection, every time you admit, yes, I have that quality too. Even in small amounts, even in different forms, you take back a piece of your power. You stop being controlled by external triggers. You stop giving other people the ability to ruin your day just by existing. Second practice, dialogue with your shadow. This sounds strange, but it works. In a journal, write down a question to the part of you that sabotages, the part that gets angry, the part that wants what you say you shouldn't want. Then write the response from that part's perspective. Don't filter it. Let it speak. What you'll find is that your shadow has reasons. It's trying to protect you, usually in outdated ways that made sense when you were younger but don't anymore. When you give it a voice, when you listen to what it needs, it stops having to scream at you through symptoms and sabotage. Third practice, reclaim your instincts. Notice the impulses you instantly suppress without even considering them. The urge to say something bold. The desire to walk away from something that's draining you. The attraction to something that doesn't fit your image. Don't necessarily act on every impulse, but acknowledge them. Say to yourself, yes, part of me wants that, and that's okay. This breaks the automatic repression cycle. It lets you choose consciously instead of being controlled unconsciously. Here's what starts happening when you do this work consistently. Reality itself seems to shift. Jung called this synchronicity. Not magic, not manifestation nonsense, but something real. When your internal world becomes integrated, when you stop fighting yourself, the external world starts reflecting that coherence. Opportunities appear. Resistance fades. Things that seemed impossible become natural. This isn't because the universe rewards you. It's because you're no longer unconsciously sabotaging yourself and projecting your internal chaos onto external situations. You start seeing clearly. When you're not busy projecting your shadow everywhere, you can actually perceive what's in front of you. You can read people accurately instead of seeing your own stuff reflected in them. You can assess situations objectively instead of through the filter of your unresolved issues. This clarity is a massive competitive advantage in every area of life. Business, relationships, personal growth. Everything gets easier when you're working with accurate information instead of distorted perceptions. And here's the final piece that most people never get to because they quit too early. Once you've integrated your shadow, once you've reclaimed your projections, once you've made peace with all parts of yourself, you face a different kind of challenge. You have to leave the herd. Because integrated people don't fit into the boxes society needs them in. You'll be too complex for simple categories. Too honest for polite society. Too real for people who are still performing. And this means you might have to walk away from communities, identities, even relationships that require you to stay divided to belong. Let me be specific about what this looks like. You'll go to family gatherings and realize you can't participate in the usual dynamics anymore. The gossip that everyone bonds over will feel hollow. The complaints that used to unite you will sound like excuses. The roles everyone plays, the hero, the victim, the peacemaker, you won't be able to play yours anymore. And people will notice. They'll ask what's wrong with you. They'll accuse you of thinking you're better than them. They'll try to pull you back into the old patterns because your transformation threatens their comfort. It's not that they're bad people. It's that your wholeness reflects their fragmentation, and that's unbearable for people who aren't ready to look at themselves. Or you'll notice it at work. The politics that used to engage you will seem childish. The posturing, the image management, the careful performance of competence and confidence, you'll see through it all. And you won't be able to play that game anymore with the same enthusiasm. This might cost you opportunities. People who are still performing don't trust people who've stopped. You become unpredictable to them, dangerous, because they can't control you with the usual social levers of approval and disapproval. Even friendships will shift. The buddies you used to complain with about your lives, when you stop complaining and start changing, they'll feel abandoned. The friends who bonded with you over shared wounds. When you heal those wounds, the friendship loses its foundation. This is the loneliness of transformation. And it's real. Jung didn't promise this path would make you more popular. He promised it would make you whole. And whole people often walk alone for periods of time until they find others who've done the same work. This is individuation. Becoming who you actually are, even if it means standing alone. Even if it means your family doesn't understand you. Even if it means your old friends can't relate to you anymore. Even if it means choosing truth over comfort, authenticity over approval, wholeness over fitting in. This path is not for everyone. Most people will choose the familiar prison over uncertain freedom. Most people will keep the mask on until they die, never knowing who they could have been. But you're still here, which means something in you recognizes this is true. Something in you is tired of being half a person. Something in you knows that the life you've been living is too small, too safe, too fake. And that something is your shadow knocking. It's been knocking your whole life. You've just been calling it other names. Anxiety, restlessness, depression, self-sabotage, addiction, anger. All of it is your disowned self trying to get your attention, trying to come home, trying to make you whole. You have a choice right now. You can close this video, go back to your regular content, keep pretending everything's fine, keep wondering why you feel hollow despite doing everything right. Or you can open the door. You can start the work. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready. Now, because the thing you're most afraid of facing, the part of yourself you've spent decades running from, that's exactly where your power is. That's where your authenticity is. That's where your life is actually waiting for you. The integrated human being is rare. Most people die having never met themselves. They live entire lifetimes as a performance, as a reaction, as a half-formed personality trying to be good enough. But you don't have to be most people. You can choose the harder path, the path of truth, the path of wholeness, the path of becoming real. And real things, truly real things, they endure. They matter. They change the world just by existing in it fully. So here's your final question, and answer it honestly because nobody's listening but you. Are you ready to meet the stranger who's been living your life? Are you ready to reclaim everything you gave away? Are you ready to become dangerously whole? The door is open. You just have to walk through it.